Welcome to the Playing Hooky podcast with your hosts Rachel and Nathan, brought to you by UtilityMuffinLabs.com. Consistently rated adequate.
Welcome everybody to a Playing Hooky podcast. This is your duo, your team, Rachel.
And I'm Nathan.
How's it going, everyone? How's your whole life?
How's everything?
I asked you first.
Well, so I'm great. This is the first time we're doing video since our big move.
Yes. And you can't tell because we have the same background. Ha! Psych,
but it's
suckers.
like starting everything over again.
It is.
However, the hope is the lighting is actually decent. We'll have to wait and see how this turns out before we edit and see, how we can adjust. But we're working, I think, within the confines of the space that we have and hopefully making something that looks decent.
I think it looks okay. I think you look good. So
I think you look great.
Well, thank you. You're so sweet.
Shucks.
Oh, shucks. So what are we talking about today?
So we are talking about two shows that we went and saw recently. We went and saw a couple of metal bands, and then we saw like a punk band.
Yep.
And so we're just talking about those things.
Sure.
Buzz on the mic.
So the first thing we went to this place in Indianapolis called Black Circle Brewing, which is a pretty cool venue. It is a brewery. They do have food. They do have beer, lots of good beer, in fact. But they also have a lot of shows. And you, I think, became aware through either the bookie faces or the interwebs about a band that you have liked for quite some time called Eyehategod. That's right, folks. Eyehategod. E-Y-E.
E-Y-E.
E-Y-E. Hate God. And we went to go see them. They had a couple of really cool openers. So why don't you tell me a little bit about like how you kind of got into this band and why you even wanted to see them at all?
I don't really know how I got into the band.
Is it because they had a controversial name and you were like, I could fucks with that?
No, I don't think so. I heard about them probably the first time in like the late 90s. I think I was probably like 16 or 17 years old. And thank you for taking away my fidget tools.
Yep.
I think I was like 17 or 18 years old, somewhere in that area. And someone, I'm trying to remember who was it suggested. Anyway, somebody suggested that I check them out. And at the time that I listened to them, I didn't really care for them. I wasn't really into that style of music, which is kind of like a sludgy, really kind of like, I don't know, they evoke kind of like a gross feeling almost, like the vocals and the music. I just wasn't into it at the time. But then...
So is it because it wasn't up-tempo, it wasn't quite your style, was it not aggressive enough?
I think at the time I was into a lot more like death metal and like just like really fast, like thrash metal and stuff like that. So it wasn't really my thing. It wasn't until like the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years that I've gotten into more like what they call sludge and like doom metal and things like that, like things that are not like super up tempo.
So less things that are like and more things that are like boom,
so one of the bands that played on the ticket is a band called Phobia, and they're a grindcore band, and that would have been more my style at the time. But recently, I don't know, I think my tastes in metal at least have expanded and kind of changed a little bit. They've altered somewhat. But yeah, so I'd never been able to see them, and just so happened they played at this very local venue in Indianapolis, which is also a really cool venue.
Yeah.
And we got to go see them.
Cool. So like, what were you most, like, I guess, impressed with, or what's the thing that kind of struck you about seeing them live? Because you'd listened to them for a while, so did anything stand out, or were you surprised by anything?
I wasn't really surprised by anything. I think that one of the things I really liked about the band was that they definitely were very tight as far as like instrumentation was concerned.
Tight.
However, it seemed to me that maybe they were having some issues that night. I don't know what that was about.
I don't think it was the band. I think it was the venue.
Yeah.
I think the venue was having some issues with the soundboard. It wasn't a very big, first of all, it's a pretty small venue, right? Like, you would say like, oh, it's in a bar, it's small, and that's true. But surprisingly, I think the bar has pretty good acoustics, all things considered. I think it was more just, it seemed like every band that went up before them were all having some kind of audio issues. And then probably... as is like a an artifact of their particular style. Whatever the overarching issue was affecting them even more severely. Like, for whatever reason, the guy running the soundboard like could not get the singer's mic up high enough. Yeah. So if you were at the back of the room, you could barely hear the vocals at all.
And it definitely seemed like they were having an issue with bass as well. Like they were having an issue with the bass feeding back. Honestly, I'd never seen the band before, and I didn't feel like it took away from their sound quality. However, you can definitely see why they might have had an issue with it as a band.
I think they were a little more perturbed than the audience. I think they were kind of getting frustrated with the sound guy. But overall, I thought it was like a pretty good show. I think they put on a really good performance, and I liked their music quite a bit. The band that went on before them, Phobia, that was very aggressive, and I was like less into that. I could still really appreciate what they were doing, and like they played the shit out of their music, but it was very much like
Where's some of the other bands that we saw?
Cult Hammer was one, and that was an Indianapolis local. And then I can't recall the other band.
The other band was Hate Song.
Hate Song, yeah. Yes. I got a pin from Hate Song. So Hate Song, Cult Hammer, spelled with a V instead of a U,
it's a very traditional metal thing.
Which I learned was like a metal thing. Yeah. So they had some pretty cool merch, and so I picked up a pen, and we got a sticker. And if you're watching this on video, you'll see that Nathan is wearing my Eyehategod hat.
Yeah. That's right.
So I really liked the band, and it got about halfway through their set, and I was like, this is like a really good band, a really hardworking band. I could tell, they've probably done a lot of touring, and they've been around for a while. And I was like, I'm really enjoying myself. I'm going to do the responsible adult thing. I'm going to go out and buy some merch. I'm going to support this band because my understanding, being a novice in understanding of the music industry, is that bands really kind of make money off of merchandise, right? That's how. Like, that a lot of bands now will just post their stuff up online, and you can get it for free. And a lot of record labels will kind of take advantage of bands sometimes, but their merch and touring is really like where their bread and butter is. So I was like, I'm going to go buy myself a hat. So I had a $20 bill, and there's some t-shirts there. And I was like, I don't need another t-shirt. And a lot of the designs, this particular band, Eyehategod, is from New Orleans. So a lot of their designs are very like, indicative of the downfall of New Orleans post Katrina, as far as like just bringing up a lot of like images of like the macabre and just the desolation that the city went through, and kind of like speaking to that darker place. All fine, cool t-shirts, nothing I wanted to wear day to day. And also they didn't have any women's t-shirts. I'm like, I just don't need another men's t-shirt that I'm cutting up to look like a girl shirt. So I was like, okay, well, what can I get? Well, Nate has told me, and I don't know if it's true, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with him, that he has a lot of these like trucker hats. Like he has this D&D hat that he likes to wear a lot, and you've got your sword hat that you like to wear a lot. And sometimes I'll just like pop him on, and he's like, oh, you look really, really cute. And I was like, well, maybe I'll get myself my own little trucker hat. Yeah. So there was an Eyehategod hat that has EHG, and it's got like a couple little like semi-automatic assault rifles on it above the lettering and above. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's funny. Maybe I'll get that, And so I got myself a hat. And you know how many times I've worn that hat out in public? 0 times. Nate, however, has found his new favorite hat. So I guess I bought you a hat. You're welcome.
Well, I feel like my hats are your hats.
And and your t-shirts are my t-shirts. Yeah. There's that very...
You get to wear my t-shirts to bed.
True.
And I get to wear your hats outdoors.
You're too skinny for a lot of your old t-shirts. So those are my Jimmy Jams. Those are my Jimmy Jams.
Or too big. Like I'm in a weird middle position.
Yeah.
With my body mass. I'm like too skinny for some and too fat for others.
Which means they're just right for me. You've got a lot of Goldilocks t-shirts that just, do me well. Other than that, there was some really good food at the venue there attached to like a little restaurant. And so we got some yummy empanadas and like Mexican food. And the beer that they had on tap, some of it was, I think, their beer, but a lot of like local beer. So that was good. But anyway, yeah. Well, anything else you wanted to comment on?
Oh, yeah. So if you're not familiar with Indianapolis, there apparently is a bit of a metal scene here. And I've learned that since coming here. There's a lot of local metal bands. And Black Circle Brewing is definitely like it's a metal place.
I think they have a lot of metal, punk, and then I saw that the week after we went, there was like a big drag show. The first week of June, that was sort of like a horror themed drag show, which would have been really cool to go see, but just you can only go to so many things between adulting and working and everything. But yeah, that seemed really cool.
And I had a Cuban sandwich there. It was great.
Yeah,
it was really good, and they had like plantain chips, and so food wise, it was awesome. And then atmosphere of the place, they got like cool pinball machines. They play like VHS movies on all their TVs. So it's a really cool place. I would definitely suggest going there.
Yeah. If
you come out to Indianapolis and you're looking for something cool to do, go there, go to Kuma's Corner. Like those are really cool places.
Yeah, I'd say those are two good spots, and kind of in the tradition of all metal venues, it's in a kind of rough neighborhood.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it's in a not so great neighborhood.
No, yeah, so maybe look it up beforehand, know where you're going. But yeah, I think whenever you live in a pretty conservative place, I think you're gonna start to find that if you look hard enough, or not if you look hard enough, if you know where to look, you're gonna find like a pretty decent underground scene.
Yeah.
Fucking Austin, Texas. Everyone knows, Austin is weird, but you come to like a really, I bet you anything, Salt Lake City has a kick-ass underground metal scene or punk scene or something.
Punk scene there or something.
Yeah, so wherever there's a little bit like of a conservative bent, you're gonna have some people that are pushing back on that, and like I think every person with a face tattoo in Indianapolis came to that show.
Oh my God, so many face tattoos. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, there are like face tattoo.
Yeah, and there was a young man there with a proper mohawk. None of this like faux hawk bullshit. No. Like homeboy had like a good like foot high mohawk.
He's probably the kid in Indianapolis with the mohawk. So if you somehow manage to see this, good mohawk.
Yeah, we liked it. We appreciated it a lot. A lot of good battle jackets. Both punk and metal battle jackets were present. I actually got a pretty funny picture. If you follow me on Instagram, or you can find my Instagram by going to utilitymuffinlabs.com. Somewhere in there, I think there's a nice picture of Nathan and his twinsies, because we went to this show and he was wearing a hoodie.
I forgot about this.
And he was wearing the famous Cannibal Corpse hoodie that has two zombies eating each other out. One of them nailed to a crucifix. So, wholesome. And we go to this show, and he manages to stand next to the only other guy in Indianapolis with the same hoodie, who probably went to the same Cannibal Corpse show we did where he bought it.
I thought that, but there was actually two guys there.
Besides me,
wearing the same hoodie. So
yeah, and he didn't know it. He didn't know he was standing next to it. It was like two girls wearing the same dress to prom. So I sort of like managed to shepherd him over a little bit, and then snuck behind him and got a pretty funny picture.
Yeah, the other guy I never saw inside with his back to me, but yeah, there were two other people. I wore the hoodie because I was like, I just want to wear this hoodie and chill. Yeah, and I was like, oh shit. Everybody else at this show also saw Cannibal Corpse and got the same hoodie.
Well, it was like two other guys. Yeah, but still, we've mentioned this before too, but when we went and saw Baroness, there was a band that opened up for them, Deaf Heaven. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned that like there was definitely a Deaf Heaven uniform where all the guys who were into that band kind of were dressed exactly the same. And there tends to be like a metalhead uniform, a punk kid uniform. Like there's just, you can kind of tell what type of music people are into by like what they're wearing. And there was definitely like a couple of different uniforms being represented at this club. Yeah. There was like the camo shorts, black hoodie uniform. There was the skinny black jeans, metal jacket uniform. Like there were a couple different brands of dude.
They're like, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of like, Phil Anselmo, New Orleans, like down fans. And then like, because they're there for Eyehategod. And then there's like, like a more black metal audience. Cause like some of the opening bands are kind of like, blackened, like black and roll, I think they call it, or like death metal, black metal kind of overlap. And then there's like just the general metal fan who's, so yeah, it's cool.
There were like a couple punks there that I think they were there because it's like, this is a venue that has a show on Wednesday night, we're going to go type. Right. Yeah. So it's a good mix of people, both men and women, mostly men. I think metal tends to draw mostly men. So.
Yeah. But I have noticed, this is one thing that's kind of surprised me. I have noticed that like in Indianapolis, there definitely does seem to be like a higher ratio of females at shows than like what I noticed purely anecdotally in like the Chicagoland area.
I think, well, I don't know if that's the case, but I think that too, what I can comment on is that I'd say the majority of the women who are at the metal shows we've been to are genuinely fans of the band. You don't see a lot of like just hot girls with their boyfriends. I think you see a lot of
Ghost. Yeah, you're right.
Oh, you think there were a lot of hot girls who weren't fans of Ghost at Ghost?
No, I think that everybody that was at the Ghost show were fans of Ghost.
Yeah. I
just don't know if the audience that we were, I don't know if the show we were at and Ghost have like an overlapping audience.
You mean Eyehategod and Ghost?
I don't know that the necessarily there's as many like metal fans that are female at a Ghost show. I would say
there's a lot of Ghost fans at a Ghost show, but not a lot of those female fans are metal fans.
Right. They're like not really super into metal. I feel like you probably wouldn't see a lot of overlap between the two because like Eyehategod is more like you're into Eyehategod.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying like in general, if you go to a metal show around here, because we've been to a couple besides Ghost, it's mostly like
metal's kind of sausage festy.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I think even at the at the Cannibal Corpse show, those women were metal fans. There weren't a lot of just like hot girls there with their boyfriend. Like those were like chicks who were, some of them were hot, but a lot of them were fans of metal. And then there was a Slayer concert in town recently that we didn't get to go to. But I know like 2 or 3 girls that I'm friends with that were there that were posting pictures on Instagram. It said like, I think your average Hoosier female who is a fan of metal is actually a fan of metal. She's not just a fan of metal because she has a penis attached to it.
No, I would definitely agree with you. I think
I'm definitely not as big a fan as you are. Obviously, I don't want to try to pretend that I am, but I do like a lot of the same stuff you like.
Yeah, and I speak purely anecdotally. Again, I have nothing to support my statement, but I think what I've noticed is like maybe women in Indianapolis area are a bit more like hardcore than like the suburbs of Chicago.
Oh yeah, we're a little more hardy, is what you're saying. Yeah, like we're just like we're like less delicate,
little less bullshit.
A little less bullshit.
Yeah, like
so
less bullshit to go around. So kudos.
It's again, like you live in a very conservative place. There's going to be some pushback, so there's going to be some of that.
I don't think that being a fan of music or metal is in any way tied to gender at all.
No, I agree.
And I think that like it's a kind of shitty stereotype for guys to be like, oh, women aren't really into metal. But there is some of that like, I'm here because it looks really cool. That does exist. I mean, it does happen. But I think maybe you'll see more of that at a show like Ghost because Ghost is a little bit more accessible.
Ghost is more accessible, but also Ghost is super sexy.
Yeah, right,
so,
right.
Like,
So
it's a very sexual band. Like it's overtly sexual. I think trying to appeal to like human sexuality and female sexuality. They have a whole song about the fucking like clitoris. So it's like, yeah, of course, like women of a certain breed are going to be really into that band.
So for those of you that are not aware, I do a podcast occasionally called The Metal Mortuary, where I just play some like unsigned or smaller metal bands. So I'll be publishing around the same time as I publish that podcast. It can be listened to at utilitymuffinlabs.com. I don't publish it anywhere else except for my website because it has music in it and, for copyright purposes, etc. So it's just available on my website, but I will have songs from Phobia, from Cult Hammer, and from Hate Song on that podcast. So if you want to hear any of those bands, you can definitely check out that podcast, and there'll be a few more songs on there for people to listen to. Unfortunately, I don't have permission to play any Eyehategod, so you won't hear that. But the other stuff, you'll definitely play a song from, so you can check those out if you want to hear them.
Yeah.
That's utilitymuffinlabs.com.
Cool.
So then last week, we went.
Last week, wow, it was like almost a week ago now.
Yeah, we went and saw Gogol Bordello. Which is a band I was not familiar with until you and I met.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this band and how you came to enjoy them and what you.
Sure.
Where you discovered them.
Yeah. So Gogol Bordello is, I would say, kind of a folky punk band. They started in 1999, I believe. Originated in New York, so like the Manhattan area or somewhere in like the city. And the lead singer's name is Eugene Hutz, I believe is how you say his name. It's like an H and then a U with an umlaut and then a T and Z. So I think it's Hutz. But he's from Ukraine originally and immigrated to the U.S. And the band has had a lot of rotating members, but he's kind of one of the constants. There's also a fiddle player who has been in the band since the beginning, and he's a Russian immigrant. So I don't know how it stands right now, but the vast majority of the members are immigrants to the United States from other countries, whether it's Eastern Europe or South and Central America. So there's a lot of different flavors from different cultures in the music, but it's definitely, I would say, folk punk. Like and I'd say folk because there's accordion, there's violin, and so if you know about my history of Flogging Molly, you can probably guess how I found out about them or got turned on to them. Around about the time, a couple of years after, maybe 2 or 3 years after I discovered Flogging Molly, I was, I think, on their website or on the label's website, Side One Dummy, and just like listening to MP3s or samples or something, and I came across Gogol Bordello, and it was just something entirely different. Like the fact that the lead singer was singing as loud as possible, giving no fucks about how thick his Ukrainian accent was just really appealing to me. And it was really aggressive and really fast and angry. And the first album that I heard, and I really liked it a lot. And it was kind of just like, like a giant middle finger. I just loved it. And kind of kept listening to them, kept following them, and then kind of fell off of listening to their newer stuff like around 2010, 2012. But they're an amazing band to see live. I saw them live for the first time about 3 or 4 years ago now in Indianapolis, and it was the most fun. That show was the most fun I'd ever been to because it was the last show of that tour. And so they were really going all out. The crowd was really big, and the most memorable thing that happened was towards one of the last songs. There's this. There's usually a couple of women on stage playing like bass drums, like marching band style bass drums. And at one point, one of the bass drums got chucked into the audience, and we caught it. And then the lead singer Eugene Huntz jumped out over the pit into the crowd, and then just sang the last song while we were carrying him on this bass drum. It was very cool. So we saw him that was in the Egyptian Room at the Murat or the Old National Center, same place where we saw them this time.
Yeah.
So I was really excited when I found out they were coming to town again and we could get tickets because they were, I think, here back at sometime in the winter.
I think they were here in February.
So not too long ago, really. And just time, I think we were moving, or I don't know, we just didn't get tickets, we didn't go. So I was like, oh, we got to go see him. We've both got the day off, we've both got time, let's go see him. And so I was excited for you to see this band that I really, really liked. I think it's a very, very different type of fan than the metal show.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like to hear your impression and your honest opinion, because I love Gogol Bordello. I always have a soft spot in my heart for them. I was a huge fan in the mid to late 2000s of kind of I still like them, but I'm not following their new stuff.
So before we do that, can we address something that I was kind of curious about?
Yeah.
Which is the use of the G word.
Yeah, so the G word, can I say it?
You can say it because it's, I don't.
So the G word, I'm not calling a person this, I'm just saying this word, gypsy. So I think the fact that word is a pejorative and is a no-no word that we shouldn't be using, I don't think many people knew that back in the early 2000s.
I still don't think that most people know that now.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. One thing that I always kind of I always think of is that that band uses it sort of as a descriptor, right?
They do, yeah. So they I think one of their albums is even called Gypsy Punk, and they have lots of merchandise that says Gypsy Punk on it. And I have a t-shirt of theirs from an older album that says Gypsy Punks. And I think this is based on what I've read online. I don't know if any of this is true. But what I have read online, why the band is called Gogol Bordello, is because there's an author, I think his name Nicolaj, I think it's Nicolaj Bordello, or no, sorry, Nicolaj Gogol. Gogol is like a famous author. And Eugene Hutz, I think, said in an interview once, like, well, we chose Gogol because Gogol tried to sneak Ukrainian culture into Russia, the same way we're trying to sneak gypsy punk into the United States. And then he chose Bordello because it's like a fucking cool word that means like brothel, right? I think, I could be wrong. I'm not a journalist. This is what the internet tells me. So we're kind of like, yeah, we're gypsy punks. Like we're punks, but we're kind of bringing in this Eastern European flavor, this sort of like gypsy type music. Now, whether or not Eugene Huntz is actually like Roma or Romani or whatever, I don't know. Whether anyone in the band ever has been or currently is, I don't know. I think that they were using the term gypsy in the colloquial way that a lot of people are more familiar with it as, not realizing that that is a derogatory term among certain groups of people. And so now I think the band, you don't see really hardly any of their merch having the word gypsy on it very much anymore. You don't hear people using it as much in just like speech. I think it's taken a long time for us to realize like, oh, that's not something that people appreciate, or that's something that people associate with like being treated really, really poorly. Like, we just thought it was like a group of people and that's what they called themselves. Turns out,
like
no.
nomads.
Yeah. So I think, it's just, you can't help it if you're ignorant. But then when you're not ignorant anymore, you got to try not to be.
Yeah,
so I think that's where,
I don't think it's really like commonly known in the United States that that's like a derogatory term.
I agree.
Because we don't have the same, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but we don't have the same racism in the U.S. that they do in Europe necessarily.
I just think we just don't have that history.
Right.
Right. Like I think most people in the U.S. are only familiar with that culture because of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and not because they read the book, but because they saw the Disney movie.
Right.
So
I think all of us in the United States probably have a very classic association of like the idea of what a gypsy is, but like I don't know that we necessarily, as a whole, have put together that like those are actual people. That's like a race of people. We shouldn't use that term because it's a derogatory term.
Yeah, it's like the same. It's the same. It just. You just got to be careful. Make sure you're not offending anyone. Like and that you just try to learn and grow. Like here's a perfect example of a time in my life where I was saying something that I didn't know was inappropriate, and then I learned and I stopped saying it. So I went to high school in a very rural town, and there was a girl in my high school class who had a cleft palate, and there were many girls who had the same name as her. It was like a very common name. And, we were making fun of her, but in conversation, I'm not going to say what her real name was. Let's call her Rachel. Wasn't her name. But it's like, are you talking about Rachel, this Rachel or that Rachel, or like Rachel with the hair lip? Like which Rachel are you talking about? And and I don't think she went around, like we were making fun of her. It was just like, oh yeah, she has a hair lip, like, with a cleft lip, like what Joaquin Phoenix has, right? I didn't learn until college that was an incredibly offensive thing to say about a person that had a cleft lip. Like
I just thought that's what it was called.
I had no idea. And like then when I learned, like, oh shit, like that's really offensive, I shouldn't be saying that, I changed. It's the same thing with little people or dwarfs. Like it's not they don't like being called midgets. So maybe if you know that, don't go out of your way to call them a midget. Like use the proper terminology. So anyway, Gogol Bordello, I don't think that it was like ever meant to be offensive to a group of people. And they may own that term. They may be able to appropriate that term. I don't know. I don't know the cultural history of everybody in the band. But that being said, you will, if you go look at Gogol Bordello stuff, you will see the word gypsy used here and there.
So, fan base. It was definitely a diverse fan base.
Super diverse.
But I would say what stuck out to me the most was kind of like almost like a hippie aesthetic.
Kind of.
Like a lot of like silks or like pseudo silks and like mismatched striped coloring and like a a lot of weed smoking.
A lot of weed smoking, kind of hipstery, but like dirty hipsters, like actual hipsters. Like a woman came up to us and talked to us apropos of nothing and said, I'm not from Indianapolis, but this is the third time this week I've seen the band. I followed them here, and here. But every time I come through Indianapolis for a show, I always stop by this vintage place and drop like $300. And she's like, yeah, like every year I just, get all my clothes from this one shop. And I'm like, man, it looks like it. Like,
yeah, right.
Like I could see her whole wardrobe being from this one vintage store.
Yeah, but the interesting thing was, like, basically everybody that we know, not everybody, but like a vast majority of the people that we know or that I've met through you in the gaming community were there. There's like a whole bunch of us. Like,
it's a popular, whatever reason, like the Indianapolis gaming nerds like Gogol Bordello a lot.
They definitely
we all have that in common.
To be able to play like a fairly large venue twice a year in the same town, and Indianapolis doesn't get a lot of like big shows to Indianapolis for whatever reason. So it obviously must mean that they're very popular. Like, we'll get big shows, but it won't be in Indianapolis.
It'll be like in the suburbs
Right. And then like a lot of the big touring bands, they just skip over Indianapolis for whatever reason. Like, unless they're huge, like Metallica will play Indianapolis, but like they probably won't be back for like 3 years. But they play, they tour every little town that has an arena, know. So as far as like my experience with the show, people were really super getting into it.
Yeah.
That's one thing I noticed. The music, it's not really, I can appreciate the music for what it is, right? Like, it's very talented musicians, very tight band, and
good live, really good live.
So like anytime you have a band that like is a punk band, but they have like a horn section, or they have like 2 percussionists, or like a fiddle player, like you're definitely dealing with a band that is not just a punk band. Punk bands have a stereotype of being very like basic in their playing. That's not the case with this band. Like these are like solid musicians who know how to play their instruments. Very like rocky, very invigorating. The music it's like makes you want to move, and move people did for sure. There was a lot of like very terrible white people dancing.
A lot of that
all around me. Like no one moving the same way, but everyone kind of moving in a like. Yeah. It was like I hadn't seen so much bad white people dancing in one place.
There's a lot of bad white people, but then closer to the stage, where you were not, there was a lot of sweating and pushing and jumping, and it wasn't moshing. It was more just like friendly, like jumping into each other.
Yeah. So here's an admission about myself. I don't like people's sweat on me. So my days of like, getting in the mosh pit or like being up close to the stage, I'm done with that. I go to enjoy the band, to watch the band play and enjoy the music. And usually I do it like this. It's just me. I'm not a mosh guy. So I definitely enjoyed it. And I will go with you whenever you want to go.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy their albums.
No.
Or to like buy a ticket to their show. However, I had a good time. I had a lot of fun watching them, and it was something I got to do with you. So I'm not a convert per se.
It's very, very upbeat and fast in a happy way.
It's super positive.
It's not really super positive, but it's very up tempo. It's a lot of like,
I mean, it's got like an Eastern European sound to it, and it's just like that style of music. It's not really my thing. But like I said, I can appreciate it for what it is, and for $30 or $25, like it's a worthwhile show.
Yeah.
But it's a show. Like I'm not gonna go buy a T-shirt because I'm not really, if you're playing them, I'll let him play, but. Outside of that, they're not going into rotation on my playlist.
It's totally fair. I wasn't expecting you to like be the biggest Gogol Bordello fan.
I mean, but it's, to be fair, it's the same thing with the other band,
Flogging Molly.
With Flogging Molly, or like really any of those like those style of bands. Because there's a bunch out there. Like that's really not my thing, but I don't hate it. I'm not against it. I might go to a show.
Cool.
For the
so did you have fun? Was it kind of fun?
I had
people
a ton
watching?
of fun. Yeah, I had a ton of fun. Standing, my favorite part was the part that you mentioned earlier, when the woman walked up to us and began to have an unsolicited conversation at us.
So she sat down next to Nate, and she's like, "Who here's a flogging Molly virgin?"
Gogol Bordello.
Oh yeah, Gogol Bordello virgin. Sorry, she's like, "Who here's a Gogol Bordello virgin?"
And accidentally, I raised my hand because
now he's in.
Right, I'm a silly ass follower, and I didn't, I fell into the cult behavior and went, "Oh me," and so she sits down and she starts to talk. Now I've realized at this point I've made a grievous error.
Yeah.
Because now she thinks we want to talk to her, and I don't. So I did what like most like people who witness a car accident or some sort of like terrible thing happen.
Yeah.
I just stared off into
You didn't
space.
make eye contact.
No,
like I had to talk to her then.
I refused to make
me.
eye contact with her because here's the thing. I'm not comfortable with people that apropos of nothing just come up and start talking to me. We were already talking to some folks that you work with.
Yeah.
And I was getting to know them, and they're very awesome people, totally cool. I'd love to hang out with them. But like, that's all the energy I had, right? Like I gave them all of my new people energy.
Right.
And this woman didn't ask my fucking permission to come up and talk to me. She didn't say, "Ooh, I've got a thing. Do you want to share in that thing?" She just assumed because we're at a show sitting down that we wanted her to come over and talk. And I wanted her to know, without being overtly rude, basically being passively aggressive, that I had no interest in talking to her. And nothing she said mattered to me in the slightest. And so she talked, and I willfully and obviously ignored her and stared off into space.
Straightforward.
And then she got the point, or,
her friend came out of the bathroom.
Right, and she walked away.
But she had like a full 2 or 3 minute conversation with like kind of me, but mostly herself.
Yeah. They were all nice to her and humored her, but I refused to because she doesn't have permission to take my time. And I think I don't care if it makes me an asshole. Like, you don't have permission to come up and talk to me. You're a fucking stranger. I don't know you.
Stranger
I don't want to know
danger.
you.
Yeah.
If she came up and was like, "Hey, do you guys want to have a conversation?" I would have said, "No, thank you." All wrapped up.
I would have said, "No, thank you."
No, thank you. Right?
But she didn't give you that
She
choice.
didn't give me that option. She just came over and assumed because I was also in a mutual public place, she got to just come up and spew her bullshit in my ear. And like, I don't need to know that she goes to the secondhand store in Broad Ripple. I don't need to know that she saw this band in Michigan. I'm not her friend. And I don't want to be her friend.
So I'm glad that one experience didn't spoil you against the whole show.
Oh, no. She's just typical of people who think that because you share a mutual hobby, that automatically requires you to engage with them.
I can kind of like feel where she's coming from, though. Like, I'm always like probably more chatty than I need to be when I go to the store.
Yeah.
I'm like hanging out with the cashier, like, "Hey, how's your day? How's it going?" "Oh, okay."
Here's the thing. Why that's different is because you're both sort of captive audiences.
Yeah,
right?
we both have to be there.
It's like if you get into an Uber, right? Like, your driver is stuck driving you and you're stuck riding in the back. Now, you can do one of two things. You can either just not say a word, stare straight forward, and pretend that they're not a human.
Right.
And you have this awkward exchange while you drive to wherever you're going.
Yes.
Or you can break up the monotony because you're both captive. You don't have something else to distract you. So it's like being a taxi driver, being a limo driver, right? You two are captive here. It's totally normal to have a conversation with that person. Every time I take a ride share, I talk to my driver talks to me, and I don't feel bad or weird about it because we're both stuck there. When you go to the store and you check out with your cashier, that's just common courtesy, right? They have to check you out. You chose to go into the non-self-checkout line, so pleasantries can be exchanged. You're both captive audiences, right? You and I and your friends were sitting off to the side on a couch, having a conversation, obviously, amongst ourselves. She walked over and inserted herself in there and just assumed it was okay. She didn't ask for permission. There was no social norm permitting her to do that. In fact, it was quite the opposite. This off the side couch conversation was clearly private. These were people we knew.
I'm just delighted and tickled by how ferociously you are.
I could go on.
Yeah, I know you could.
For hours.
I know.
I could go on for days and days.
Yeah.
don't walk up apropos of nothing and just introduce yourself and start talking. If you recognize me, or if you recognize, like if I recognized you on the street, but like I wasn't super familiar with you, I might be like, hey, what's up? And you'd be like, oh, hey, how are you? And then maybe because we had that, you could have a conversation, right? But she just walked up and was like, who's seen this and who's done that? And I do this and it's so cool. And I was like, just fucking write in a letter and send it out to Reader's Digest. I don't care.
So you had mentioned that there was a lot of weed at this show.
Yeah.
Do you think that like perhaps her inhibitions were lowered from something, or do you think that that's just like her day to day? That's how she operates.
To be totally honest, I think that she's probably she's gone to so many shows and she has such a vigor for them, and like saw that we were kind of like off to the side and thought she could come and like we're a captive audience and she could come and just share in that joy.
Maybe she's trying to pump us up.
Right. Maybe. I don't know. But either way, I was like, I don't need to know anything about you and don't care about you.
Well,
like, I don't want to be your friend.
I love it that's like the most memorable experience for you of the show. Just like your interaction with that lady.
Why? Like the music should have been a more memorable, and honestly, the music was much more enjoyable. She's just like, people have a really like a bad habit of annoying me. And usually
people have a bad habit of annoying you.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, they're not trying to annoy me. I am frequently annoyed by people.
Yeah, I was going to say, we could change that sentence around a little bit and say, you have a bad habit of being annoyed by people.
I don't think it's a bad habit.
No?
No. I think it's a good habit. I think, on a whole, you should be nice. And honestly, I think my reaction was as nice as it could have been, because I could have been like, hey, get the fuck out of here. Right?
Yeah, that would have been terrible.
Right, that would have been terrible, and it would have been totally rude.
And we would have been very embarrassed.
Instead, I just pretended like she wasn't there. And then eventually she left.
I feel like this could have been like, this whole like transaction could have been like a whole subplot for an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I mean, it basically...
You're such a curmudgeon.
Right. Well... Okay.
I love you, but you are. But anyway, that's fine. I didn't really want to talk to her either. I just can't help but be polite.
Yeah. Well,
how weird it would have been so weird if both of us had just been like straight up like staring.
I really wished other people would have not humored her, because I feel like if everyone would have just like turned their attention away from her, she would have been like, "Oh, what a bunch of assholes!" But our interaction would have only been like 10 seconds, and then I wouldn't have lost like 5 minutes. Like, she murdered 5 minutes of my life. That's 5 minutes I'll never regain.
Okay.
So like, she's a thief. She came over. She's essentially a time vampire.
Yeah.
She came over, and like that 5 minutes, we could have devoted 5 minutes of this podcast to something like more engaging, something that like our listeners and our viewers would have been.
Well, when you think about it, it's even more than 5 minutes. Yeah, because I don't know many times you've talked about her now.
Right. Like, I probably devoted like 8 or 9 minutes of the podcast. So she is a time
You're still going. I feel like it's like a challenge now. It's like, how much longer can I talk about this?
I could go on about like just people like that in general.
Okay.
Someone who is just genuinely trying to be nice.
Yeah.
And sharing a hobby that they enjoyed. But I don't care. I don't like them.
Okay, fair enough. So Gogol Bordello, not going to add him to your list, but would you recommend other people check him out?
Yeah, I mean, if you like a high energy, like a multicultural event, like mostly like positivity and like happy people that are all there to enjoy and seem to be having a great time.
I had a great time.
I would definitely suggest it. It's a fun show.
I got very sweaty. Yeah, I jumped around a lot.
She was out there doing like karate kicks and jumping around and like doing all kinds of stuff. And so were all the people around me.
Yeah.
And so they all seemed to be having a lot of fun. I was not the most metal guy in the room, but I was very metal about it.
There was a couple of guys who did try to crowd surf, and there just weren't enough strong arm people for it to happen.
That was the one thing I noticed about the room. The room was definitely bigger than the amount of tickets sold.
I think there was because they'd been here so recently, they just didn't sell as many tickets, but that was smaller than when I had seen them previously a few years ago. They had a lot more people in the room.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I think it was a great show, and I'd go see him again.
Cool. Well, what do we got coming up next?
What do we have coming up next? I know we're gonna watch Johnny Mnemonic. And Willow.
Mad Mardigan.
We're gonna talk about.
Do you know what that means? Mad Mardigan. Do you get that reference? No. Okay.
Should I?
Well, not if you haven't seen Willow.
Nope, haven't. I've never seen it. Here's my nerd card.
You idiot.
Yeah, so we're gonna watch Johnny Mnemonic, and which is something that you haven't seen, and then we had an idea levied to us.
Oh, we did?
Or presented to us.
We did?
About martial arts movies.
Oh.
That we each bring like an obscure martial arts movie that maybe the other one hasn't seen.
See, that's going to be hard for me because I feel like you've seen more obscure martial arts movies than I have.
Well, it doesn't even necessarily have to be obscure, right? It just should be like a martial arts movie that you enjoy.
Okay. Can it be something you've seen before? I got one.
Could be, yeah. I mean, what is your idea?
Well, it's real cheesy.
Well, mine's going to be super cheesy.
Mine's going to be more cheesy.
Mine's going to be a Billy Blanks movie.
Okay, mine's Three Ninjas.
I actually have never seen.
Oh!
So
yes,
there you go.
We found it.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of the movie that I'm bringing, but it's a movie that I've seen like a dozen times.
Yeah, I'm definitely
really
bringing Three Ninjas. I know that's probably not the martial arts movie they were hoping for. They're hoping for something like from Japan or China that's been dubbed, or Hong Kong, but straight up.
We're cheesy. The cheesier, the better.
Yeah.
I think. I want.
Or Surf Ninjas. Have you ever seen that? I can't make myself watch Surf Ninjas. That's got Rob Schneider in it.
I've chosen not to watch Surf Ninjas.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't seen it, but it's probably because also it's got Rob Schneider.
Rob Schneider doesn't need to be in this house.
Yeah. No, I can't think of one movie that I own that he's in.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't own any movies he's in.
I'm gonna make a statement here, but Rob Schneider's just he's terrible. He's just.
I've never met him. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
No, I mean, as a human being, I don't know him. I just mean like the quantity of films, everything he's been in. I think it's
mostly like Adam Sandler stuff, right?
Yeah, and then like Deuce Bigalow.
Oh yeah. That was his thing.
I'm sure he's been in some other stuff.
But see, I'm looking across the way, and I see 2 copies of Kung Fu Hustle there, which makes me think it would be hard for us to find like a quality martial arts movie that neither of us had seen before.
I don't want to do reviews of quality martial arts.
No,
films. You
want it to be terrible.
Yeah. I'm gonna basically present to you a remake of Karate Kid with Billy Blanks in it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can't remember what the hell it's called.
Actually, we could pull out the Hilary Swank Karate Kid if we're trying to get.
Oh my gosh! So
okay,
that movie I liked that movie.
You liked Hilary Swank.
I liked Hilary Swank when that movie came out. I think I was like a teenager, and I was.
Is that why you were more into me when you found out I did karate? Because of your prior crush.
But karate is kind of badass.
It's kind of badass. Like it's not the most badass thing.
No, but it's like way more badass than not doing it. Oh, okay. So
doing karate is more badass than not doing karate. Right. Join today.
Right. So the movie is called Showdown.
Oh yeah.
So eventually we'll watch Three Ninjas.
Yeah.
And Showdown. There's also a movie with Chuck Norris I really want you to see.
Okay.
And it's a movie where Chuck Norris and a kid this kid pretends he's a ninja. He's like trained, but it's terrible, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But it's a movie I watched religiously when I was a kid. So
what was the one that I was watching a few months ago? It was on Netflix. I was like, with the show enough. What's the movie?
Oh yeah, The Last Dragon.
Last Dragon.
Yeah, that was suggested too, but I think both of us enjoy that movie. Both of us
have seen it and enjoy it.
Yeah, so
but we could watch it and
we could watch it and just
maybe we'll just watch it for us. It's just for our time.
Not everything has to be for a podcast.
It's true.
Not everything. So, anyways, I think that's about it.
All right.
Again, if you like metal music and you want to hear some of the bands that we heard and then we saw locally, check out the website utilitymuffinlabs.com. Under the Metal Mortuary podcast section, we should have a new post there. It'll be the first one I've done in like 2 years. So,
and if you like Gogol Bordello or folk punk music, YouTube and Google's a thing. So go check it
out. yeah. Go do some research.
Yeah.
Go enjoy a thing.
Stop being lazy. What's wrong with you? Go live your life.
Yeah. Go watch some stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you guys for watching, listening. We're glad to be back, and hopefully the video looks good, and you can see us on YouTube.
Bye. I gotta go mow the lawn. Hey folks, this is Rachel from utilitymuffinlabs.com. If If you enjoyed the Playing Hooky podcast, think about supporting us. For more podcasts, art, videos, and gaming, go to utilitymuffinlabs.com. Follow our podcast on Twitter @HookyPodcast, on Instagram and Facebook at our Utility Muffin Labs name, and support us on YouTube at Utility Muffin Labs. Check out our other gaming-related podcasts, 25 Years of Vampire the Masquerade and the Nerd Words podcast. Thank you all for your support. Utility Muffin Labs, consistently rated adequate.